So now moving on, let's talk about essential movements that are so important for exercise. There are some key movements that are the primary ways our bodies have of moving, such as pushing and pulling and squatting. These movements are key to fitness and what an exercise routine should be centered around. So the primary forms of natural physical movements are squatting and standing up, pushing horizontally, pushing upward, pulling downward, pulling horizontally, hinging at the hips and bending over, raising your arms, twisting or rounding your torso, pushing downward, walking and running, jumping, and extending the arms or the legs at the elbows and knees. So in order for every muscle group to be worked, any fitness routine should contain at least one of every one of these movements or a variation of it, okay? Such as a slightly different angle or grip or stance or form of the movement, such as a lateral movement instead of a compound movement. So instead of pressing upward overhead for your shoulders, you can of course do a side lateral raise to work them, because both of those are natural ways to work the shoulders. And so at the very least, each of these movements should be done a couple times a week each. And that's at the very least. Okay, this is because if you go too long without moving a body part in a certain way, your joints and the other mechanisms in your body are going to start to stiffen up, and you're going to start to lose the ability to make that movement happen throughout the full range of motion that you need to. And this is another reason why mobility drills and stretching are so important too. And so I'm teaching you this because when you are working out, sticking to these most natural movements that the body is supposed to make, because they are the ways it is designed to be moving, are what works best when exercising. And you should avoid exercises that are not natural ways of moving and do not feel ergonomical and are uncomfortable on your joints or spine, etc. Okay, or are excessively complicated and fancy like we see on Instagram with these so-called fitness influencers just trying to show off by doing things that are not even natural or practical or functional. Okay, those types of exercises simply do not work well, all right? They may look cool to someone who doesn't understand anatomy, but they're not natural or functional exercises. Okay, when working out, you need to stick to what works best by doing what is natural for the body. So some must-do exercises that should be in every routine are squat, deadlift, back extensions, crunches or other ab work, chin-ups and pull-downs, push-ups and bench press, bent over and horizontal rowing and downward rowing, overhead press, shoulder side lateral raise, bicep curls, tricep extensions, lunges, leg press, plyometrics, which is jumping, as you should know by now, pushing in other directions, upward and downward or whatever angles you want, okay, calf raises, quad extensions, hamstring curls, pull overs, face pulls, and walking, running, or biking. These are the most common movements we do when exercising for a reason, because they are the natural movements our bodies are supposed to be doing. So you need to make sure you are doing all of those at least once or twice a week. Now, compound exercises, which work multiple muscles and joints, are more natural than isolation or lateral exercises, which only work one muscle and joint. And this is because the body is made up of what are called kinetic chains that are supposed to work together, okay? So you should be doing a lot more compound exercises than isolation exercises because they are more natural and more in accordance with how the body is supposed to work. So for instance, everything from the top of the back all the way down the spine and all the way down the legs here is called the posterior chain and is meant to work together whenever you are doing any sort of hip hinge movement like a deadlift or picking something up off of the floor. You have an entire kinetic chain of muscles and other mechanisms working together from the traps all the way down to the calves when you are doing those things, okay? So that is so much better than working each one of these muscles independently, even though you do still want to do those isolation exercises at times. Another great example of a kinetic chain and how it functions is when you punch, all right? So a punch is not just like this. Okay, and that's why bench pressing is less functional of a movement for fighters than other pushing exercises, which actually mimic the way that you would be pushing your fist forward when standing. Okay, so a punch actually involves an entire kinetic chain that actually starts with your feet planted on the floor and the thrust you get from your legs. Okay, and so the kinetic energy starts there, all right, and then travels up your body all the way through your arm to where your hand strikes. All right, so that is another example of a kinetic chain. Okay, you don't punch like this, you involve a whole kinetic chain. So there's a thrust from your feet, there's movement in the core, and there's this energy traveling up throughout the whole kinetic chain. That's why for people who are fighters, doing a bench press is less functional than if you were to stand holding a cable or a resistance band and press like that, all right, in a way that uses the whole kinetic chain and engages your body in the same exact way that you would when you are fighting. All right, that makes it more functional and transferable to what it is you're trying to do. So this is why compound movements are more important than isolation movements, because they are more functional as they naturally work the body in the ways that it is supposed to by engaging its kinetic chains.